Hi everybody, welcome to class 6. We're going to go a little bit deeper into houses. We did some of it in lesson 1 and lesson 2 when we were looking at trines and things like that, but we need to go deeper because there's so much to do with houses, and we'll continue that too next week. Somebody needs to mute themselves, probably Kassan, just because some clicking coming in the background. Okay. Okay, so let's start with some chanting. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Vakritunda Mahakaya, Suryakoti Samaprapa, Nirvigyam Karame Deva, Sarvakareshi Sarvada, Dhyanamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Mantramulam Guru Padam, Mantra, I'm sorry, Mantramulam Guru Kripa, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa, Om Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mitroma, Amritam Gamaya, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavatitamasthu Ma Vivishai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aditaye Samaye Mangulai Buddhaye Cha Guru Shri Krishna Bischa Rahave Ketave Namaha. Honoring the great ones, Lord Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Vedavyasa, and my spiritual holy tradition, and all my great Jyotish teachers. And let's see who we have today. Okay, Sundari is not here today. Sasha said she couldn't come. Amanda's here. Joy's here. Brett is not here. It's like 5 a.m. in Hawaii. And I don't know if that volcano is going off on his island or not. Jonna is usually watching tapes because she can spend time with her family. Allison, I have not heard from. Elizabeth's here, Kassan's here, Venus here, and Ian's here, and Annette is not here today, or is she? No, she's not yet. Okay, great. Okay, so where we are today, we're on lesson 6, looking at houses. We're going to focus a little bit on the 4th house in health, on the 10th house for life activities. We'll look at some of the other key houses, but we did the trinal houses. I'm probably not going to review them. We talked about talents and trinal houses a couple times, so probably won't do that. I will do ashta mamsha today, which and start introducing house transposition, which is called bhava suchika. So we'll do that today. Now, next week, as I mentioned originally, I was going to go to Chicago for my dad's memorial plaque unveiling, and it's a little too crazy. So I'm going to be on the Zoom memorial service, which is on Sunday, and that's usually when we meet. So and I have to give a small talk at it. So I'm going to move class to Saturday, the 9th next week. Saturday's actually sometimes a better day for me, and then we were trying to decide about that now that houses has ended. But we're moving class to Saturday next week at noon, and I'll have to change it and go to webinar, and they'll send you an automatic reminder if you forget. And every time we change a class, it's kind of throws off your rhythm. But so put on your calendar next Saturday at noon. We'll start with Navamsha and marriage part 1. We'll do 2 weeks on it because it's such a, probably could do 3 weeks on it, but it's such an important activity. How did you do with, did anybody listen to the 64th Navamsha tape? It's kind of interesting. Anybody have time? I know this week was a zoo. This coming week's a zoo also. Anybody have time to listen to that?
Yeah, listen.
Okay, good. Yeah, interesting stuff, isn't it? It's very important for medical astrology, and sometimes people are going through big events with Saturn, Rahu, or Ketu transits through their 64th Navamsha, and if you don't know how to spot it, you miss it, you know.
I'm not sure about how to figure it out. I mean, I listened to the tape, but it just isn't real clear. So
okay, I will go over that again today. Okay. Okay, so let's continue. Vedic Astrology Conference, November 18th to 22nd. Is this happening live, which is with masks? I don't know. Although I just found out I don't have to lecture in a mask, so I was relieved. But he's got over 120 people. It's always a great conference. Nakshatras Part 2 is going to be November 6th. That's probably going to be the promo lesson again. This is an advanced nakshatras because it's on nakshatra techniques and predicting and stuff that no one ever teaches. Chances are, because of Thanksgiving and the conference, the class will actually really move into full speed after Thanksgiving. But we'll definitely have a lesson on November 6th, which is kind of like the preview lesson. So for those of you who like nakshatra and nakshatra techniques, that's coming. That preview is going to be November 6th at least. And next year I want to do Secrets of the Sun. The sun chart's never really talked about, and it's so important for government and work, and there's so much to do with it. And of course, the moon and the sun are the two most important planets. So that's the new class I have planned. I will probably teach also I'll probably teach Vargas, teach probably Vargas too, some more Vargas too, but because we started with you guys with Navamsha. So that's coming up. Okay, any questions on anything? Okay. Okay, so again, there's a second edition which I sent about 20 minutes ago. So refer to that one. I deleted a number of slides and I added some slides and I resorted things, so it was just kind of great. And always acknowledging all my great teachers before me. So in the first lesson we talked about how we can't really transfer the house meanings from the Rashi chart to the other charts. Sometimes there is overlap. Most of the time you get into trouble if you evaluate your Varga charts using Rashi chart knowledge. So each Varga chart has its kind of own set of rules, and usually it rotates around the key house, and then it's figured out from there. So like even the D24 chart, which is about higher education, like the 9th house is about college, and the 7th house is about your PhD, and the 3rd house is about your master's. I mean, those are things that are, it's not like you would normally figure that out. I mean, the 7th house in the D24 is not about your relationships at college. It's about whether you pursue a PhD program, and and if you have the planetary strength in the 7th house. So just remember, Varga charts, we have to learn new things about them. And here's the general overview, which you just kind of have to remember. And there's some subtleties and that we can bring in later. So again, we learned the first house is always the core house in any Varga chart. It's about inborn talents and blessings from previous incarnations. You've got Jupiter in the first in the D9. It means you've brought in talents as a teacher, counselor from a past life. You've got Mars in the first house in the D9. You brought in talents as a fighter, a soldier, or whatever in a past life. So look at the first house to see the talents that you're just born with them, and they're just there. Second house, I don't even like to use it for money, but some people do. It's really about the nature of the second spouse, and most people end up with a second spouse, especially in America. And so the second house in the D9 is about what causes the breakup in relationship, and that leads to the second spouse. So what happened, typically if you're not happy in your marriage, you have an adulterous relationship, like Rahu in the second house, in the D9, and then you're, you end up getting divorced, and your second spouse has, kind of a Rahu nature, so something like that. But just remember this. And for some reason, I always have trouble remembering that, but it's pretty easy. Second house is the second spouse. It's a little rhyme couplet there, so never can forget it again. The third house, we'll go a little bit more into that. There are other things that we can do with the third house. It's how we use our hands, but it's traditionally, when we go over it next week, it's about the native sexuality and that which arouses the spouse. There's 3 sexual houses in the D9, the 3rd, the 7th, and the 11th, and they're all a little bit different. The third house is also about sexual charismatic energy, sexual charisma. Fourth house, which we're going to spend a lot of time on today, is about luck with health or problems with health. So to me, when I look at the Navamsha chart, one of the things I always look at is the 4th house in the Navamsha chart. Well, the owner of the 4th house in the Navamsha chart is the 64th Navamsha. So we'll find a quick way to show you how to do that. If you don't have the programs do it too, but so basically, you don't want malefic planets in the 4th house in the Navamsha chart. It causes health problems in the dasha connected to that planet. You do want benefics in the 4th house in the Navamsha chart. It supports happiness and health. And it's the owner of the 4th house in the Navamsha chart, the lord of the 4th house in the Navamsha chart, that's the 64th Navamsha. So that's how you quickly calculate it. So let's pull up somebody's chart. Here's Marilyn Monroe, and we'll look at her later. The owner of the 4th house of her Navamsha chart is Aries, so her 64th Navamsha from the ascendant is Mars. And then we can also look at the 4th house from the moon, which is, the Vedas tell us to do that. And the owner of the 4th house from the moon is Scorpio, so that would be either Mars or Ketu, and because Ketu is in Scorpio, Mars would be the preferred owner of the 64th Navamsha from the moon. So it's very simple. Look at the owner from the 4th house from the moon and from the ascendant in the Navamsha chart. The planets in it contribute to health, but the owner will be used for timing when health problems will happen, okay? The 5th house we've gone over before, and we won't spend too much time on, are abilities that are learned over time and they unfold. So sometimes, usually by college, your 5th house natural abilities are coming out. 6th house, I don't know, but people say money from work, and I never, logically, I've never been explained it well, but it's also pain and punishment from the past. All planets in the 6th house in the D9 create pain. So we generally like to keep planets out of the 6th, 8th, and the 12th houses in the Vargas, and the 6th house does cause pain and punishment. The 7th house is the general nature of your first spouse, your first marriage, your sexuality. So that's an important, people usually don't ever ask questions about those things. Sexuality is always so private, but that's where you look for it at. You put K2 in the 7th house in the D9, person, maybe a monk. You put Venus in the 7th house in the D9. It's actually too overactive there. It may create too much sexual energy. So we'll go over that in detail. 8th house in the D9, health issues, addictions, deaths from past life. So like the 6th, 8th, and the 12th house are always like really important, but 8th house in the D9 will bring up health issues, addictions, and deaths. And it will do it in the dasha period of that planet. So that's how we would time that. The ninth house in the D9 is considered the core house because it's the Navamsha is the 1/9 division. So the ninth house really stands for our overall good luck, and it's called the core house. But it also represents the third spouse and your learning abilities through a guru or maybe what your father passed on to you. The 10th house we'll spend a lot of time on again to go in more detail, because the 10th house is probably one of the most important houses you should look at besides the 4th house in the D9, because it will show how you make money or what you're drawn to. Again, it's second from the 9th, so it's money from the 9th in a sense. And the Navamsha chart is a good luck chart anyway from past lives. But it usually shows us kind of our talents, what we're drawn to do with our skills. And over and all, my mentors keep showing me that, if you're worried about rectification, you want to get the 10th house right first, because, I mentioned to you, I've got Jupiter in the 10th house in my Navamsha chart, and it's in Taurus. And my initial experience in college was teaching college literature and then teaching college writing, and then I've always somehow been involved in teaching, and then teaching Vedic astrology and teaching. I always, and then also because I'm a financial counselor, basically in my newsletter business professionally. Taurus is a earthy sign about money. Jupiter in Taurus is a financial advisor. So let's pull up my chart again. So this was a little, as I mentioned, I did go through a little bit of a, okay. So here's the Navamsha chart, Leo rising, Jupiter is in the 10th in the Navamsha chart, and it's Taurus. So, and I would say I was a little bit in chalk, but my birth certificate says 1115, and many years ago, my chart was rectified to 1131, which, I've used for a long time. And I had one of the best people in the world do a reading for me a few weeks ago, and he went through all the Varga charts, and he explained that, that the birth certificate time was closer, and it had to be because Jupiter is in the 10th. The other thing is that if I had Mars in the first house in the D9, I would have been divorced, and I've been married 25 years. So we'll go over this again, but the 10th house is really important for for rectification, because the planets in the 10th house will often show what you're drawn to, and the sign will be important. Yeah.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Are you using the birth chart of where you were born, or are you using a relocated chart?
I'm using the chart where I was born. The relocated chart is going to I haven't looked at the difference now, but I've taught many of you that when you move, your ascendant can shift. I think it has about a 25% effect. But I usually don't use the relocated chart and look at the Navamsha.
No?
Anyway, no. And it moved it to 1 degree Scorpio anyway. So it moved it closer to, it did move the Navamsha. It moved it to the first pada instead of the second pada. But I usually don't look at the Navamsha in the relocated chart. It's just, I've talked to a couple of people about it. I do look at nakshatras in the relocated chart. I don't want to get into the Navamsha chart because it's really kind of soul imprints, and I don't think it changes that much when you move, because the soul, with the relocation thing, yeah, your work changes, your relationship changes, your home situation, your happiness changes, your health changes, those things with the Kendras 1, 4, 7, 10. But I don't think your soul changes when you move. So I don't look at the Navamsha chart when I do relocations.
Right, thank you.
Okay, so 10th house, very important. We'll spend more time on that today. 11th house, again, more native sexuality and skills of spouse. Also a punishing house like the 3rd house. So, you know, the 3rd and the 11th houses are not really great houses in the Vargas. 11th house sometimes is considered neutral. In the Rashi chart, the 11th house, all the planets are considered to do well in the 11th house in the Rashi, but the 11th house Lord creates health problems. So this is why people get confused. Oh, the 11th house is good, but the 11th house Lord is punishing. So that's the case with the Rashi chart. And there's some of that that carries over in the Navamsha chart. 12th house, luck with hospitals, doctors, and retreats, connection to moksha, freedom, and death. Key house for timing death. So this is a whole class in itself. But when you're timing death, there are all these techniques for doing it. The 12th house in the Navamsha chart is very important. It's when the soul leaves, right? Okay. Okay. I don't know if I want to go through this. These are general rules for the Navamsha chart. Maybe let's come back to this section. All those points are important, but I don't want to get too lost in it. Actually, I'm going to move to, maybe I'll come back here. I'm going to move to a section on ashta mamsha, which I don't think I've introduced you before. How many people read my article in the newsletter about a month ago on ashta mamsha?
I did.
You did. Okay. You can go back and read it. It's on the blog. It was very okay. It's what I decided to do is originally I was going to have a whole lesson on all these special padas, and then we've been doing one a week. So we did Virgotama, we did Pushkara last week for creativity and almost, you know, exaltation, and this week we're going to do Ashtamamsha. Now, Ash means 8, and so this is when the chart moves 8 signs from the Rashi to the Navamsha chart, and we'll take a quick look at that too. And this happens 8 places in the zodiac. How wonderful! And 8 times 8 is 64. Anyway, there's beauty in numbers in Vedic astrology too, for those of you who are into numerology. But so the 8 places this happens, and you have to kind of memorize where these are, because none of the computer problems show you, but it's really important when they turn up and when you're doing people's charts. So Aries rising Scorpio Navamsha is Ashtamamsha, and we'll look at the degrees. Gemini rising Capricorn Navamsha, Cancer rising Aquarius Navamsha, see how it keeps moving 8. Virgo rising Aries Navamsha moves 8. Libra rising Taurus Navamsha moves 8. Sagittarius rising Cancer Navamsha moves 8. Capricorn rising Leo Navamsha, we'll see Marilyn Monroe there, moves 8. Pisces rising Libra Navamsha moves 8. So there's 8 places that happens, and you have to kind of, you know, because I've written articles on this, I usually can spot these, but if you don't memorize them or look for them, then you'll miss something key. I mean, you know, and this happens all the time. And you have a strong chance. Well, not a strong chance. There's 8. You have 9 planets in the ascendant, and there's 8 places where you're going to have ashtamamsha, and there's a good chance that you're going to have an ashtamamsha position in your chart. Or, 1 in 2 of you is going to have them. So we'll look for them in your charts too. So here are the key degrees. And so this is Barney. This is Pot. Anyway. These are the key degrees, and you can study that. It's no point in me just listing them. The psychology of ashtamamsha is we know the difficulty of the 8th house in Vedic astrology. It's about transformation, but it's also about getting stuck, right? When we have moon in the 8th house, our emotions are stuck. We don't express our feelings. It's a very difficult placement for the moon. It's the worst place for the moon, actually, in the 8th house. And it's kind of a place where you get stuck. So ashtamamsha is about the psychology that it's struggling between its inner world, which is the Navamsha chart, and the outer world, which is its desire to succeed in the world, right? So it's so the transposition, I use the word transposition. The word is bhava suchaka. No, the mind turns off when you heard the Sanskrit, unless you really get it down. We'll have a lesson on it. But bhava suchaka means, I've translated it into house transposition, sign transposition really, is it sign transposition? How many signs does the planet move from the Rashi chart to the Varga chart? If it moves 6, 8, or 12, or even 3, there are usually problems. And the one that's most difficult, because the 8th house is always the most difficult house, the 8th house transposition is called ashta mamsha. It means eight movement of 8 signs. So that's all you have to remember. Ashta mamsha is transposition of movement of 8 signs. So there's certain nakshatras have certain problems, and these are very specific. We'll look at Hitler and we'll look at Marilyn Monroe in a minute. So the 4th pada of Bharani in Aries, which is at 2320 to 2640, we need to learn discipline and understand blocks in life and knowledge around death and transformation. Ardra 2, which is going to be the 2nd pada of Ardra in Gemini, which is going to be 10 to 1320, creates desire for perfection, where we destroy what does not match up. But what happens is, if you find a person with a planet in one of these ashtamamsha positions, and they're really kind of stuck their whole life about that planet's issues and that maybe that house's issues, and if you can pull up this handy dandy explanation, you know, it really suddenly you can shed deep light on their life, and they go, oh my God, you know. So the Jyotish is always about shedding light. And the one that I find most people have is Mula 4, which is in Sagittarius. It's from 10 degrees to 1320 of Sagittarius. Now, Mula, for those of you who studied nakshatras, is, you know, it kind of, that nakshatra kind of destroys materialism, so it points you to God. And it's the beginning of the sattvic nakshatras that are taking away the rajasic world of desire, the material world, and we're moving into the sattvic nakshatras where we want to find God. And so the beginning of the sattvic nakshatras is Mula, you know, which is connected to kind of a Kali-like god, Niriti, and she just likes to destroy things. You know, she destroys the materialism in order to remind you about moksha. Now, I have Rahu in Mula. I don't have it Ashtamamsha, but I have Rahu in Mula, and I went into my Rahu period, and my material world actually fell apart. And it took me 7 or 8 years to kind of pull it back together, because I was in such shock about, you know, going through surgery, lost my house in the mortgage crisis, my business, which had been doing well for years and years, suddenly, you know, fell in revenue 50%. And that was Mula, that's Niriti reminding me to kind of like get back to my spiritual roots, and she did a good job. So you have to kind of memorize the padas and look for them, otherwise you can forget them, and they're so important. Like, you get people like one of them, Mula 4, for example. If Jupiter is in Mula 4, it gets exalted in Cancer Navamsha, and people look at the Navamsha and say, oh, I have Jupiter exalted in Cancer Navamsha, and it's in, you know, it's in Sagittarius in its own sign. And then when you talk to those people, they've got huge blocks, and they're going, if they're in a Jupiter period, they're going through huge things, and they can't understand why nothing's manifesting. They've got Jupiter in Sagittarius, it's exalted in Navamsha, but the big thing is it's 8 houses from Sag to Cancer, so it creates this block. And I see this all the time. Somehow that one comes up a lot because I attract a lot of spiritual people for readings, and I find that I always find stuff in Mula 4, so I always remember that one. Some of the other ones are harder to remember, and I have to, in teaching them, it'll help me remember. The Janishta, we're going to look at Marilyn Monroe. She's got her moon there. Makes you satisfy others' needs above your own. Unfulfilled personal ambitions can create frustration. So let's look at Hitler first, not my favorite person to look at, but always a great teaching chart. Okay, we've looked at this chart a couple times in this chart in this class. Again, he's got 4 planets in the 7th house, and we said the 7th house is like sunset, and they're planets in the 7th house are kind of dead, or at least they're at least kind of blind to, what they're doing. He's got the ascendant there, he's got Mars there, he's got the Sun exalted there, he's got Mercury there, which is a good planet for him, but what's ashta mamsha in his chart? Did you notice that? This is your chance to practice. He's got 2 planets that are ashta mamsha that move 8 houses from the Rashi to the Navamsha chart.
Mars and Venus?
Mars and Venus, yes. Mars and Venus are in Bharani 4. So if you start learning the position of nakshatras and you can remember the padas, Bharani 4 is ashta mamsha. So notice how Mars and Venus in Aries go to Scorpio, okay, with K2 on top of it, okay. So he's got an 8 relationship between Aries and Scorpio. And again, you start thinking, oh, he's got Mars in its own sign in Scorpio. Don't forget, Scorpio is cruel. His chart lord Venus is in Scorpio. It's cruel. I mean, this was a psychotic sociopath. Certainly one of the more difficult people we've had this century, along with Stalin and Mao Zedong and people like that. Who and so he's just kind of blind to what he's doing. He's Jupiter in the 3rd. He's blind to the ethics of even it's in Sag. Okay, well, he's a good warrior, but Jupiter in the 3rd loses his ethical balance. It doesn't know morals. It doesn't think of anything of killing all these millions of people. So but anyway, the ashta mamsha position is interesting because he wanted to be an artist, and he ended up leader of Germany, and and this dictator, and this great general, and things like that. And it's not what he wanted to be, but it's almost like his chart lord Venus, Libra needs to be in the arts, and yet Libra's blocked because it's ashta mamsha, it's retrograde, it's Mars is losing the planetary war here, I believe. Mars and Venus are at are at the exact same degree within 19 minutes. This is a planetary war between the Atmakaraka, which is the ascendant lord, and again, when the Atmakaraka is involved, it means it's major lessons of the soul. Soul wants to be an artist. Venus is retrograde. It's ashta mamsha. Mars, it is winning a planetary war from Mars, I believe. The rule is in my Venus is the brightest planet in the sky, and it will almost always win a planetary war from any planet that it's conjunct. I'm going to double check that just to. Once in a while, you get these odd rules for planetary wars. I went to a conference and somebody went through all these odd ways that people, planets win planetary wars, and it's quite brilliant. But okay, so anyway, if you have Sri Jyoti's star, there's a thing you can put up called states and strengths, and sometime we'll learn how to use all these things. But this is one chart where you can really see everything at once, and it tells under the war column, it says Venus is winning, Mars is in a planetary war with Venus, and Venus is winning, and the winner goes in the column here. So I mean, I know the rules for Venus always wins the war because she's the brightest star and she's a good person, but anyway, Venus wins the war from Mars, which is why, what does Mars govern in Hitler's chart? What houses does Mars rule in Hitler's chart? Mars owns Scorpio and Aries, so it owns the 7th and the 2nd, right? Now, so I think we talked about, I don't know if it was in this class or maybe it was my other class, I can't remember. Of course, Hitler could have any woman that he wanted, but he never got married. And the day he got married, it actually triggered death in his chart. And he was, I don't know the story with Eva Braun, but they got married in the bunker. Maybe they wanted to stay together forever. And then the bunker blew up and that was it. I don't know if he thought the bunker was going to blow up when he got married, but anyway,
Didn't they commit suicide? Of course. I mean, he committed suicide.
I didn't remember that. I guess I haven't studied his life a great
I
deal.
seem to remember that the end of Hitler's life is he married Eva Braun, and they committed suicide. They blew up their own bunker.
They blew up their own bunker. Okay. And there's always conspiracy theories that they escaped to South America, but who knows?
That he's living in Argentina.
Yeah. Who knows? But anyway, it looks like he died. But anyway, Mars is losing the planetary war. It's the Marca planet, and it's a planet of relationship too. So you can, it was like, but anyway, the ashta mamsha position of Mars and Venus, it's like, he was a Venus person. He wanted to be an artist, but he just, it didn't happen, So that's kind of the block, and it was kind of, he was blocked his whole life. Now, Marilyn Monroe is even more interesting. Those of you who are older remember Marilyn as being, from movies like Some Like It Hot and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. She was a big star in the 50s, and she died in 1963 from, well, it was reported, she died of a sleeping pill overdose, and she was having affairs with both Kennedy brothers, and it was thought that, they made it seem like a suicide, but, but in many ways she had a very kind of tragic life. We've never looked at her chart recently in class. Cancer rising, moon in the 7th in Dhanishta Nakshatra, which is a very kind of wealthy nakshatra. Not too many, she's got Mercury and Sun in Jaimini astrology aspecting the moon. Her Navamsha rising is Capricorn. So it's a 7, and it, 7 transposition is, is about relationship, and everybody in the world wanted to be in relationship with Marilyn Monroe. It's like, the sex goddess. But and again, Venus in the 10th, good for career and stardom and stuff like that. If she was not really a happy person. Even though she had, and this is always the case with, Hollywood film stars too. They get the fame, but then they give up, a lot of other things. I mean, they're hounded by the press. Everybody wants to be in bed with them. She had three failed marriages, including with Joe DiMaggio, famous baseball player. It's a very fascinating life to study. We could probably spend 2 hours on the chart. What's also, where does the moon go in the Navamsha chart? It goes from Capricorn into Leo. It's the chart lord. And so that creates ashtamamsha.
It moves 8 houses.
Right. So it's the chart lord, and it's the moon, the karaka for happiness. So it's like happiness is always blocked for her. Moon is the karaka for marital happiness also, and domestic happiness. It's kind of blocked, and she has to be the sex symbol, and and be this Hollywood star, and she, and it's interesting what the Vedic texts say about this pada is it makes you satisfy others' needs above your own. Unfulfilled personal ambitions can create frustration. So, you got that feeling with Marilyn Monroe is that, she was the sex toy to all the directors and all the studios and her agents and her husbands. and it probably she didn't really at some point get to do anything that she wanted. And I haven't read her biography, and I just remember stuff from my film study classes. But she, you get the feeling that she just, even though she, made it big, a #1 Hollywood, not the #1 star, huge Hollywood star in the 50s and early 60s. It never was fructified because of the ashta mamsha position. Okay, isn't that fascinating? Okay. So now you're all going to remember ashta mamsha, right? Because you're always going to look at where planets go from the Rashi to the Navamsha chart. When they move 8, and at some point you can remember the degrees. You're going to remember the end of Aries. You're going to get Bharani 4. You're going to remember Ardra 2, the middle of Gemini. You're going to remember, Dhanishta 2, which is the second pada, or the first pada of at the end of Capricorn. Those are easy to remember, and then you have to remember the other ones. The Mars Venus ones are also interesting because it's Aries, Scorpio, Taurus, Libra. So you can there might be ways to memorize them. It's worth, for those of you who are professionals, you might want to look at them because they're very important, and they show a lot of hidden soul energies. Okay. So just because I did that, let me quickly introduce house transposition then too. We're going to have a whole lesson on this. I'm not going in order, which I never do, but I just decided I wanted to make sure that I gave you some good case studies today. Okay, so let's go back so we can go a little bit in order so I don't get too crazed here. I just want to make sure we fit that in today. Okay. Now, the third house we said was also a sexual house, but it also is connected to our skills with hands. Again, the third house in the Rashi chart is hands. Hasta Nakshatra is hands. So whenever you see Hasta Nakshatra, you get people in Virgo. You find people, if there are key planets in there, that are into massage and working with their hands, sometimes building things in shops and things like that. But the third house in the Navamsha chart is also about your skills with your hands. And the Vedic texts say that if you have the sun there, then you have skill in firearms, swords, and archery. Moon there, skills with handling liquids. Mars there, skills with knives, spears, and weapons. I guess that would be guns today. Mercury, skills with books. Jupiter, skills with writing and articles. Venus with painting and the arts. Saturn with heavy things. I don't know if they talk about Rahu and Ketu, and I didn't have notes on that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how do you interpret good at handling water and liquids? I mean, you don't spill water when you pour it. This is the problem. Now, one of the things, my goal in life is to modernize Vedic astrology. If you go back to these ancient texts and you read these poor translations of Sanskrit into English, you come up with stuff like this. And 10,000 years ago, maybe you wanted to tell somebody that they were good with knives and spears, but that's not popular today. To modernize Mars today, we would probably have to say machinery. Mars is connected to like fixing things. Good with your hands to fix things like lawnmowers or broken tools or mechanical things. So that's how we'd probably modernize Mars today. Moon is also how do we modernize the moon today? The person that uses water a lot, I think of hairdressers when they wash their hair. I don't know. I don't have enough case studies on any of these, but anybody in class can think of ways that the moon might be used with one's hands.
How about milking cows?
Barry, I have in the third house, and I don't use water. So.
Okay.
So how do you think that comes up in your chart, or does it? Is it afflicted? Is it
My moon is Vargotama, and it does, but I don't use water, you know, so I don't know. I mean, it just seems pretty odd.
yeah,
We don't have to talk about it. It's just
yeah, it's odd.
Do you hang? Are you a nurse?
no, I'm an artist.
You're an artist, and you don't use water at all in your art. No liquid.
I'm a glass artist.
She's a glass artist.
Maybe
Okay,
it's working
so
remote.
this is okay. We don't need to go into this, but the point is that you get these traditional Vedic texts, and they tell you these things, and then they don't always translate into modern terms. But we did find a nice way. Let's write this down. Repairing machinery. We have different things that people do these days, so you have to kind of like you have to retranslate some of the stuff, and I didn't do that one. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the 64th Navamsha, and I went over it real quickly. So the Vedic texts more traditionally talk about it being important from the moon. In practice, it's probably more important from the Lagna, because usually we look at the 64th Navamsha for the for health, and whether it's going to, and it's also can be it can lead to a lot of tragic energies if it comes up at certain times. And it can create hidden difficult times. Like sometimes you'll see somebody's chart and the dash is good and everything seems good, and they're having some crisis, and it's often in the 64th Navamsha, the 22nd Drekana. So you have to be on the look for it, and because it gives health problems. And I showed you a quick way to figure it out. So the computer will figure it out if you have Sri Jyoti Star, and you also get Sri Jyoti Star because it's was designed by a PhD who's in physics, and he's gotten a lot of things out. So there's a table in Sri Jyoti Star, and again it's sign house quality. It's that same table that I showed you. There's a table you can pull up, and then way down here it'll give you 64th Navamsha from the ascendant for Marilyn Monroe was Mars, and from her moon is Mars. So Mars was a difficult planet for her in terms of, and we'd have to go back and do case studies on that. But I did Catherine Zeta-Jones, but let me let's look at her chart.
I have a question. Would that indicate more that foul play in her death than they think?
Possibly. I think probably people have written articles about potential foul play in her chart. I think she might have died. She actually, I think, died at the end of her Mars period. So that that's a good point. That's what I remember. We'd have to look it up. And I didn't. We have to use regular calculations of the moon. Let's just look it up real for fun. I kind of remember she died at the end of her Mars period, but so moon in the 7th, you use regular dashas. Let's just look it up just for fun. She died in what, 1963 or 62? I don't remember. I know I was even like 7 or 8 years old and we were all talking about it. It was like, why? This is Catherine Zeta-Jones. I don't have Marilyn Monroe up here. That's why it's not working. I just blew it. Okay. No, she was born into a Mars period. She died in her Jupiter period. I think it was Jupiter. This type of thing with the foul play, we'd actually have to look at the D. Okay, it was Jupiter Rahu. I knew it was something. It was a Dasha Sandhi period, Dasha Chidra period. The end of a Dasha period is a big transitionary period, and it's a period where you can be very vulnerable. And Jupiter is in the 8th house here with Mars. Mars is kind of the 64th Navamsha. But so Jupiter is vulnerable in the 8th house anyway, and Rahu in her chart's in the 12th house, and Jupiter's nakshatra. So there's a lot of there is interesting, and there's a lot of 8 relationships here. So there's a lot, but anyway, the 64th Navamsha isn't related to that. But if we're calculating the 64th Navamsha by hand, again, for those of you who don't, it took me a long time to make this easy. Okay, and we'll try to look at all of yours, so we don't get too lost in talking about famous people. So,
Barry?
Yeah.
I have kind of a tangential question, if I can ask. It's not quite related to Navamsha, so you feel free not to answer right now, but when you mentioned Dasha Chidra, right?
Yeah.
So when you're going from one Dasha to the next, so one planet's Dasha to the next planet's, does it matter where the upcoming planet is situated in relation to the currently ending Dasha? For example, I'm finishing Rahu, but I'm going to Jupiter. My Jupiter is placed 12 houses from Rahu in my natal chart. Does that matter at all?
I've never heard that. I don't think it matters.
Okay.
I think when we're studying dashas, it's just that the ending part of a dasha is kind of a vulnerable period because all the karma from that you haven't worked out suddenly kind of rushes in to get completed.
Yep.
So it can be a very kind of intense period. Something Rahu Mars is particularly intense, but okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so good question. So so Marilyn, so if we were calculating her 64th Navamsha, so from the ascendant, we're looking at okay, you can do it by degree. Sometimes there's actually an actual degree that you want to look at, and sometimes you're often just looking at the owner of the Navamsha Pada. So like I said, the easiest way to calculate Marilyn Monroe's 64th Navamsha, and I did it already at the beginning of class, is that 4th house is owned by Mars, no planet in there. So Mars is, as we saw that in the table, is the Lord of Aries. It's the 64th Navamsha. And from the moon.
Oh, we're talking about the Rashi chart or the Navamsha chart?
The Navamsha chart. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Okay. The Navamsha chart, the Aries is the 4th house from her Navamsha chart. The Lord of Aries is Mars. The 64th Navamsha is Mars from the ascendant. From the moon, it's also Mars because 4th house from the moon is Scorpio. Ketu's in here, so Mars is the ruler. So both her 64th Navamsha rulers are Mars. Now we'd have to actually look, and I didn't have time to do this, is what transits were happening when she was killed in 1963. Were they going over any key degree of her 64th Navamsha? So if you're looking at the exact degree of the 64th Navamsha, you take the ascendant and you count 8, and so the exact 8 points would be 20 degrees. 20 degrees of Aquarius is the exact degree of her 64th Navamsha from her ascendant. So you can do it that way also, but it's too hard to do it that way. It's easy just to see whether the ruler of the 4th house from the moon and the 4th house from the Navamsha. So that's how you find out, that we can, like I said, there's a whole, if you want to learn more about 64th Navamsha, I gave you the bonus tape. You can study it in detail on how you can help. But we'll look at Catherine Zeta-Jones in a minute. It does cause health problems in its dasha or bhuktis. Here are the rules again. I don't want to go over them. I just explained them. So here's Catherine Zeta-Jones's chart. And I've got to pull that up. Okay, I'm going to have to go back and forth because I didn't. You have to go because I didn't memorize these. Okay. Catherine Zeta-Jones, of course, was married to Michael Douglas. She started out as this British comedian in a show. Was it Last of the Summer Wine? I'm not sure. One of those. They had all these British comedies. And She rose, to quite prominence. You probably all remember her from. She got the Academy Award, I believe, in Chicago. She was one of the major stars in Chicago and became a very major film star. And she, Michael Douglas was a kind of a problem husband before he married Catherine Zeta-Jones, because I think he had a number of affairs. But Michael developed tongue cancer, I believe, and Catherine had a kind of a mental breakdown when that happened, and it was connected to her 64th Navamsha. And to see that, first of all, we have to calculate her 64th Navamsha from the ascendant and from the moon. Okay, so since I gave you again, it's not planets in the fourth house in the Navamsha chart, it's the owner of the fourth house. So what's her 64th Navamsha from the ascendant in the Navamsha chart?
Mercury?
Right, Mercury, because Gemini is lord of the fourth house. And then from the moon, it's the same thing like Marilyn Monroe, 4 houses from her moon, and Leo gives her
Scorpio.
Scorpio, which would be K2 or Mars, and we probably have to look at both. K2 is exalted, and Mars is with 4 other planets, five planets actually. So Mars would, So anyway, it turned out.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What's the difference between from moon or lagna? And another question: do we look at from other planets like Venus?
No, traditionally, actually, the Vedic texts usually tell us to look at it from the moon. And all of my colleagues who have done research on it feel like the ascendant is as important or more important. Again, the moon is going to be more about mental health, and she did have a mental health breakdown. She was diagnosed as being bipolar, and
she's bipolar. She's manic depressive. She's on medication her whole life.
Right, and she came out publicly when it was people don't want to talk about their mental illness because it's such a shameful thing, and she went public about it and about her treatment, and it really opened up, bipolarism and mental health issues are huge, and they're swept in the closet, and she helped bring it to the forefront. So she was very courageous in dealing with it, and it happened. Again, I didn't memorize this, so I have to go back and forth. So again, looking at her chart, Scorpio rising like me, maybe that's why I like her. Chart lord, we have to decide who's again, when we have dual lords with Scorpio, it's often both. So we always have to look at both. K2 is considered stronger here because it's with Venus. And Leo is actually considered a place of one of the best places for K2, along with Sagittarius and Pisces. Mars is in a friend's house. It's strong. It's not nearly as strong as K2. So K2 is probably her chart lord in this chart. What else can you say about her chart? What about that? What about her moon? What about her debilitated Saturn? What's wrong with the moon? You guys are in the moon class. What's wrong with that moon? Pisces in the 5th, wonderful.
It's hemmed in also, isn't it?
Hemmed in. Yes. Okay. Yes. Moon. The moon, which is lower than 9th and the 5th, gives her all this talent and fame for the arts. 5th house is singing and dancing and artistic expression and acting, along with the 3rd house. So that moon is very strong in Pisces there, but it's the GK, and for those of you who know Gemini astrology, which is connected to 6, 8, and 12 for illness, and it's hemmed in by Rahu and Saturn. Remember, one of the things, those of you who finished the houses class, we always want to see if a planet is surrounded by good guys or bad guys, and this is not good. Rahu and Saturn, and this is a debilitated Saturn, So her moon is kind of a mess. So what happened was, Mars is also the 6th house lord here because Mars on Scorpio. So in her Mars K2 period, she's going to be in, we said that Mars and K2 were very connected to her 64th Navamsha, right? And Mars owns the 6th house anyway, K2 owns the ascendant, you know, so there's a lot of stuff going on here. So in Venus, Mars, which you can see how sometimes, even, you know, when you study my Dasha class, a lot of stuff manifests on the 3rd and the 4th levels. You know, it's not, you know, when you want to really time things specifically, you have to look at the 3rd and the 4th levels. In Venus, Mars, December 2010 to March 2011, she had her first bout and she took it to the hospital for mental illness. And I believe after that, she came out in March or April to the press and said that she had gone through therapy. And then her second bout in Venus K2, 3 years later, she also had another bout of mental illness. And at that time, Saturn was transiting over 64th Navamsha from the moon and stationed at Libra. So this is where sometimes these degrees get important. And this is like, you know, this is how good astrologers time things. So her moon is at 515. And so if we count 8 exact signs from 515 Pisces, we get 515 Libra, okay? So you see how that is. If you want to know the exact place of the 64th Navamsha, which is, it's different, you know, we said the 64th Navamsha Lord is Mars and K2 for timing the dashas, but for timing a transit, you would look at the exact point. And from the moon is more about mental health. The ascendant might be more about physical health, and that's what you were asking a minute ago. And so when Saturn, when she had this nervous breakdown again, Saturn was in Libra, if you remember in 2013, it went right over her 64th Navamsha and she ended up in the hospital again. So isn't that interesting? So this is how you can have this very timing. So this is very detailed knowledge for timing. So what the rule is that you, and there's people, good astrologers, you know, and I even forget to look for it, is that you always have to know the exact point of the 64 Navamsha in the chart, because when planets go over that point, it can trigger something major, particularly if it's a long transit of Rahu, Saturn, or Ketu.
Count 8 signs. I'm a little lost.
Okay, count exactly 8 signs from the exact degree of the moon or the ascendant. So 8 houses from Pisces is Libra. Again, the moon is at 515 Pisces, so 515 Libra is her exact 64th Navamsha point. Okay.
Her Navamsha point is different than the planet, which is in Navamsha, which would be Mars or whatever.
Right. The 64th Navamsha is the owner of. Yeah, it is a little confusing, and I do apologize here. Okay. And it's because, like I said, the easiest way to calculate for dashas, the easiest way to calculate the 64th Navamsha owner is to count just the owner of the 4th house, which you saw very quickly is which is Mercury, for her, and then from the moon, it's also Mars. So anyway, but Mars and Ketu. So her in her Navamsha period, yeah.
And Navamsha Lord and then the 64th Navamsha and the Navamsha point are 2 different things. So we got 3 things to look out for.
You got 3 things, yeah. So for the transit, you want to know your Navamsha point. So we can look at yours. We'll look at some of you just so you know where they are. You don't want to kind of. You should also calculate it on your own. So my 64th Navamsha from the moon is going to be the 26 degrees, 2629 Taurus. And I have noticed whenever I have Saturn or Rahu or Ketu or something going over that exact point, and it only happens every 18 years or 29 years, there's always some health crisis or something happening. So that's how it works there. Now, for my From the ascendant, it's now different. The 64th Navamsha from the ascendant is the Lord of the 4th house from Leo, which is Mars or Ketu. And my whole Mars dasha actually was, I was sick almost the whole time. I was going to the doctor every week, and that's why I eventually moved out of Sedona. But so just for timing, Mars is my 64th Navamsha from the ascendant for physical health. And during my Mars period, I was pretty much sick the whole time. Not like in the hospital sick, but sick enough that I was going to the doctor every week. So it's a quick way of looking at it. So yeah, thank you. 2 points. For transits, we're looking at the exact point of degrees, and in my case, it's 26 degrees from the moon. It's 2629 Gemini, and from the ascendant, it's going to be also in Gemini. But it's going to be 4 degrees Gemini. So yeah, I think it was pretty dicey when Rahu was going through Gemini this last year. I think it was. Okay, so that's a brief understanding. So the thing about the bottom line, which is there are other meanings for the 4th house too, but the 4th house, you always want to look at it for health. And again, the Lord of the 4th house in the Navamsha chart, the dashas of it can bring health problems, and that's the 64th Navamsha. So Lord of the 4th house, and the 64th Navamsha point, which is more advanced for transit study, which is something we do in my transit class, is maybe a point where Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu will cause vulnerable energies. Okay, is that clear now to everybody? And I know it's new to you, and you always re-listen to the tape, but I think I was pretty clear in explaining it. And I just reiterated it, and your question, Vina, is good because it's good that not everybody remembers these things. So you're all lost? Okay.
No, that was clear.
No, I'm not lost at all.
Okay, good.
I'm very confused still, but I'm gonna have to go back and look at the slideshow myself and figure it out on my own time.
Okay, well, let's just look at your chart. We should do some examples from class anyway. And the more examples we do, then the more everybody will learn. But you should all figure out your own. You don't want to kind of get too crazy about it. Okay, so 4th house in the Navamsha chart again is Scorpio, so it's Mars and Ketu are the owners from the ascendant, and from the moon, the 4th house lord is Venus, and Venus is the lord of Taurus from the moon. Okay, and we get moon 64th Navamsha is more mental health. And you're in a Sun-Venus period now, so maybe it has been a little taxing with the tornado, the hurricane. But
Yeah.
And 64th Navamsha from here is going to be Mars. So your Mars periods could bring up health issues. We don't know. Or K2 periods. K2 is pretty strong. Okay, and then the exact point for transits is your ascendant's at 4 degrees. So 4 degrees Libra would be 8 houses away for the 64th from the 8th house, from the 8th house point, or Westerners would call it the 8th house cusp from the ascendant would be, in an equal house system would be 445, and then 2433 from the moon, so it would also be Libra 24. So transits through Libra are, if they hit your 64th Navamsha, could be tricky. And so we are going to have K2 retrograding back into Libra next year. So watch it when that happens. You can do remedies, but you just know it's nice to know what's going on because you can handle it. And then, you're not going to have Saturn going through Libra for a long time. So you're good. Okay, is that clear?
Yes, now I kind of get it. Thank you.
Anybody else need me to look at their 64th Navamsha? The more we spend on time on this, the more we won't get to other things, but it's good to get one thing well. Okay, you don't have to be embarrassed. Okay, you can go through the material again. Now, on a spiritual level, the fourth house can be, it's a moksha house. Can have a very spiritual blessing. It's the house of desire for knowledge. And so if you meditate on the deities connected to planets in the fourth house, they bring blessings. So those people who like spiritual astrology, so if you've got Moon in the fourth house in the Navamsha chart, you would be devoted to Krishna. If you had Mercury, in the fourth house, you would be devoted to Lord Buddha, that kind of thing. So most of you aren't into that kind of stuff, so we don't need to go into that, but there are people that are. Fifth house we talked about when we did all the talents, so we don't go over that again. The sixth house can cause temporary separation from the spouse. And reason for that, and I have seen this with people when we look at timing marriage and things like that. So the Navamsha chart is, when we study it the next 2 weeks, is a lot about our relationship in marriage and partnership. And the seventh house for the first wife is going to be, your spouse. So the sixth house is 12th from the seventh. 12th means loss or separation. Now, it could be the loss of your wife. More than likely, it might be separation where you have to move. Like we have all the people, migrating to the U.S. You leave Mexico to earn money, and you send all your money back to your wife and kids so that they can survive because there's no work in Mexico. So, but that creates a separation of spouse, and that would be the sixth house in the Navamsha chart. I'd have to kind of let me look at that in my chart. I just want to see. I do get separated from my wife. She travels a lot. I'm just curious to see. It's Saturn. Saturn is my sixth house. You have to watch that next time she goes away for a long time. But I think this would be more kind of the sixth house separation might be months and months and months. I usually get weeks and weeks and weeks, but I don't get months and months and months. But it does happen. Eighth house in the Navamsha chart, can lead to divorce if you're in the dasha of the eighth house, particularly if you have like Mars or Rahu or Ketu in the eighth house in the Navamsha chart. It could time a divorce. Ninth house relationship with the guru, dharma to build temples if the Jupiter and the Sun are here. Ninth house is also kind of relationship with, I talked about, we talked about in the intro class, ninth house, the Navamsha chart's about dharma. Dharma is, often connected to what your father did. If you're born into, if we didn't have a crazy world today, and it does happen. I was talking to my friend the other day. He's a abstract painter, and he's very good and actually makes a living selling art. His father was a painter. If you're very lucky, you're born into a family. You're born into family dharma, and you do what your father does. And that's the connection of the ninth house and dharma. So there's a connection to father, but it also could be a relationship with your guru. If you want to look at spiritual astrology. 10th house benefics will bring blessings of Lakshmi, and malefics will block finances during their period. So we're going to look at the 10th house in detail now because it's the one that we should really know really well. But you want benefics there to bring blessings of Lakshmi. You don't want a lot of malefics there because they block finances. And now, I'm going to skip this because we did it already. I'm sorry I'm skipping around. I'm just deciding how to reorder the slides based on what seems to be happening or what I want to talk about. So I apologize if I'm not going in order. So 10th house in the D9, and I think this is the most important house to look at. Like I said, you want to use it for rectifying. You want to use it for helping people decide what they enjoy to do most in their life. Usually most people figure that out, once in a while you get a lot of blocks or malefic aspects or confusion, like they don't know what to do with it. So you don't want two malefics in the 10th house. There's a lot of the second from the ninth is second from the 9th is the 10th, but the second house is money and accumulating money. So there's a money connection to the 9th, to the 10th house, because it's second from the 9th, and the 9th is the good luck from past lives and dharma, and the second from the 9th then becomes, money that you achieve because of your good luck from past lives. Okay, that's another way of looking at it. You don't want a lot of malefics in the 10th house in the D9, because then it creates a lot of major ups and downs in your life. And a lot of people are going to have one malefic. 2 malefics, you're going to have big problems. 10th Lord in the D9 feeds you your strength. You're there. So use it to cure money problems, and that's a whole. Probably do that at my seminar in Sedona. K2 in the 10th and the D9 creates money problems. Again, K2 doesn't like money. It wants to meditate and go up in the woods and go to the ashram, and it wants to kind of go on walkabout and and that kind of thing. So K2 in the D9 is not good for money. We want benefic planets there to really help you. Well, look at your 10th houses. So there's a word which I don't like to use very much. Again, for those of you who like Sanskrit, it's called Nisargika Karaka, which means kind of natural signification. So sun for father, Jupiter for guru, moon for mother, Mars for brothers, those kind of things. But there's more to them. When you study basic Vedic astrology, you have to learn all the basic karakas, and because more than one will come up. And so usually the planet in the 10th house in the Navamsha chart will tell you a lot about what you do, about your job title, what your life is geared to, what you enjoy to do most. Okay, it works a lot, but not 100%. And when we taught this in my life purpose course, there's 16 other things that we taught, because if you want to see coherence between all the things in the chart for when you're looking at it. But this one actually, I used to use this a lot in rectification, and so we also have to remember that if I'm giving you information on the sun, but we could also say Leo here, if there's no planet in there, and I use this all the time. So I should.
Are sun considers as a malefic here or not?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Do you consider sun as a malefic here or not?
That word malefic for the sun is kind of a difficult thing. I don't like to call the sun a malefic. I mean, I like to call Mars, Ketu, Rahu, and Saturn malefics. The sun when it's out of balance can be cruel, and it can be boastful, and it can have ego. But the sun also represents the divine. So when the sun's strong, it's leadership, and it represents our interest in the divine. I mean, I have a chart that I'm working on now. He's got 5 planets in Leo, which is a sannyasi yoga, and he's very interested in just leaving the world and going off to the ashram and meditating all the time. But the Leo energy is so dominant, and you wouldn't say Leo energy is malefic. It's just Leo is about the spirituality of the divine. So I usually for certain
But
rising
exalted sun.
Exalted sun. Exalted
Yeah.
sun is going to be more divine, yes. Now, of course, you always have to look at dignity. I mean, like every planet has a dark and a bright side, and the dark side of the sun can be very malefic. It can be a tyrant, Sun and Leo conjunct Saturn or something, Libra conjunct Saturn. So yeah, the sun can be very malefic. I don't. I kind of put it in this kind of neutral territory. One of the words that's often used for the sun is cruel. Sometimes our sun is karaka for boss. Sometimes our bosses seem cruel, but leaders, nobody likes their boss usually because they don't, there's the father figure who kind of makes them work hard or be on time or something like that. So is that cruel, or is it just part of being in dharma? I don't know. But anyway, the interesting question. But I think I don't always put the sun as a natural malefic. Okay. It's in the middle. It's in between, and I would judge it by, its qualities. Anyway, good question.
Thank you.
120. So again, you can substitute. You put the signs in here also. So Leo, Sun, you know, is the Karaka for doctor, and that one, it's also executive. Politician with Rahu is going to make you a politician. Government worker, entertainer, you know, movie stars, Leo. People who like to be stars, to be on film stars. Sports figures are very kind of Leo. Marketing representatives are very Leo Sun. You know, people who like to get out there and, be shining in that way. Good at self-promotion. So qualities of the Sun. Moon, Cancer, Moon and Cancer. Karaka is always like food and restaurants and hospitality and nurses, and counselors are also very nurturing psychologists because the moon's the mind. Anthropology I never quite think of, and there are connections between Moon and Saturn for anthropology, I think.
Well, it's the history of anthropology is the history of mankind, and mankind is the moon.
Okay, that's an interesting way of putting it. Thank you. Working at homes with the moon, clothing. I always think of clothing as more Venus. I don't know, but one of my mentors shared this list with me, and she's pretty good. I don't usually think of clothing as the moon, but I guess it secondarily. Public relations again is moon, being in the public. Mars, and again we'll have to say Scorpio, Aries. Maybe Aries more than Scorpio. Mars creates surgeons, people who cut things, you know, acupuncturists, engineers. Again, Mars is the Karaka for engineering. You know, you have people. I have so many friends who are Aries rising, and they're engineers. You know, Aries rules the 10th. So Saturn rules the 10th, and they're all into, you know, civil engineering or something like that. Mechanical or technical things. People like we talked about a minute ago. People who fix things with their hands, repair people. That's all very Mars. And of course, you have police, security guards, armed forces personnel, athletes are very competitive in Mars. Salespeople is Mars. Mars is actually very sales oriented, actually, particularly Aries. Real estate, Mars is considered to govern landed property. So that's why real estate is there. Farming is and land management because Mars governs land. Dancing, you think of Barney, which is a combination of Aries, Venus. I often find a lot of dancers in Barney. Nakshatra, hairstylist, that one doesn't make any sense to me. They cut hair, I think that's what somebody was thinking. Mars is a good planner, factory worker, and working with weapons. So those are kind of Mars things. Mercury, so Gemini, Virgo here. Again, Mercury is the business planet, and Mercury is the Karaka for business people. So anything connected to business, sales, management, bookkeeping, accounting, account management, of course, connected to speech, storytelling, comedians. I would say Mercury creates comedians. I used to be a comedian actually in comedy improv, you wouldn't know it. Astrologers is very Mercury, authors, teachers, and editors. I would say more primary school teachers than university teachers. Mercury governs children and childhood education, publishing, technician, computers now, and science. All the computer people are Mercury now and K2. Service providers, researchers. I never think researcher. I think is more Saturn. I don't know. I kind of disagree with this one. Secretarial work, librarians. I've done that. Marketing, advertising, stockbrokers. Yeah, stockbroker. Stocks are governed by Mercury. Shares of stocks are governed by Mercury, and so Geminis and Virgos are more drawn to trading stocks and stockbrokers. One of the professions that it also comes up in Leo a lot, but it can come up connected to Mercury. Venus, legal fields. Now, that's because people think Libra is connected to law, and it is sometimes, but I think Sagittarius is more primarily a law sign, People are interested in justice and stuff like that, and fighting for society. You do get lawyers in Libra too. Brokerage, Venus is the merchant, creative writing, of course Venus is creative anything, fashion, jewelry, wealth, image, art, advertising, marketing, design, cosmetics, floral things, spas, sex therapy, sweets and foods, entertainment. So this is, this comes up a lot. It's good, and you have to come up with a wide list. And sometimes you look at the Navamsha chart and you see Venus, you see 10th house owned by Libra, and then you have to look at the aspects, and then you have to look at, things like that. But it's good to kind of remember the wide scale of things connected to profession by planet. Jupiter also can be attorneys because of Sagittarius, counseling, of course, ministers, Sagittarius is the priest, teachers, obviously even more university professors, humanitarian workers because of Sagittarius, judges, again, Sagittarius, mediators, that's what lawyers do, career coaches, business administration, bankers. Banking is always connected to Jupiter along with Taurus. Human resource specialist, that one puzzles me. Working with children, of course, Jupiter is the Karaka for children. Religious studies, again, Sagittarius, again, public speaking, that one I don't ever think of. I'm going through these in detail because you need to logically kind of remember them because, look how many of them there are for each, category. Let's make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. Okay, Saturn. Okay, we said Saturn is science, so I see more researchers with science with Aquarius and Capricorn. Let's put Aquarius. Manual labor, again, is Capricorn. Office workers, people are Shudras. They work in the office. Factory workers, Saturn. Farm workers, again, hard labor. Personal assistants, I get that. Geologists for sure, working with rocks and Capricorn, the mountain. Land developers, archaeology, again, that's where archaeology I think is stronger, is in Capricorn. Museum work, again, studying ancient things, old things. Counseling, I never see counseling connected to these signs. I don't know if anybody else does. Working with the dead and dying, I always think of Scorpio more for that. State planning, yes, because Saturn is a long-term business planner. Disaster relief, yes. Animal care, that one I always think more of Pisces. Civil engineering for sure, because Capricorn's the infrastructure sign. Drug rehabilitation, alcohol and drugs are often connected to Saturn and Rahu. Working in hospitals and prisons, working in ashrams and monasteries, police work. Saturn and Mars go together well, so I think you can get police work with that. I'm working on giving you the logic of these so that maybe you'll remember them, and it'll help also. I think Rahu and Ketu, scientists, again, Aquarius is connected to science. Hypnotherapy, science. Hypnotherapy is kind of interesting. It's also dealing with the Rahu and Ketu deal with the subconscious, so hypnotherapy is dealing with the subconscious. Energy healing, Ketu definitely. Alternative career, yeah, Ketu and Rahu do oddball things. They don't want to be normal. They don't want a job as an accountant. They want to be different. So alternative careers. Foreign work, again, that's always Rahu and Ketu. Sometimes import-export is connected to Rahu and Ketu. Nuclear medicine, that one I wouldn't have thought about. Pharmaceuticals, yes, Rahu is drugs. Ashlesha is drugs. Terrorism, yes, Rahu. Beggars, yes, Ketu. Illegal trade, philanthropy, I have no idea why that's there. Philanthropy goes with Jupiter. This is, there are people, I mean, sometimes Rahu creates very charismatic people that kind of become gurus, but they're not authentic gurus. So I would almost think they're kind of, Rahu does have a spiritual side, but I'm going to go, I think that's a stretch. Definitely philanthropy does not make sense. K2 for philanthropy is that makes sense. K2 likes to give to charity. Rahu for sure is selfish. Circus and carnival workers, that's very Rahu. Shaman or self-improvement professions. Okay, so I went through it in detail just because I think it's important for us to kind of think about the planets and the signs and how we can kind of translate them into things. So let's look at all your charts and see what's going on in your 10th houses. Okay, so I'm going to start. There's some people that I never get to, so I'm going to make sure that I get to you today. For example, like Sundari, we haven't looked at her chart in a long time. So I'm going to go backwards today. Okay. 10th house in the, again, I don't know, I think you're involved in Ayurveda, aren't you? 10th house in the, yeah. 10th house in the Navamsha chart is Virgo, and Virgo, again, there's no planet in it. We don't actually even have any planets aspecting it. Isn't it interesting?
Did you see Navamsha, Barry, or did
I'm
you mean
looking at the Rashi first, okay? I'm looking
The
at
Rashi.
yeah, I started with the Rashi just because I want you to always kind of start with the Rashi just because it's, you know, even when we sometimes forget, we think we can do the Navamsha separately, but we can't. Anyway, so that's why I started there. But okay, Virgo is also the owner of the Navamsha chart. It's got Jupiter and Mercury in it, so that can make you a teacher. Now, Virgo to me, and is always connected to healing and service, or accounting or business. You know, Mercury is exalted here. Jupiter is going to be a counselor. Do you ever teach Ayurveda also, or you just counsel around it?
No, I'm actually learning now, and my goal is to eventually transition out of what I'm doing now into actually practicing Ayurveda, and also into like working in healthcare, software, and stuff like that.
Okay, and what are you doing? Okay, I'm just looking at the first house here. Now the 10th house again is Gemini, and I'm sorry I'm throwing you off here because I'm looking. You know, we have to look at different things.
Did you notice how her ascendant in the Rashi moves 10 houses in the Navamsha?
Yes, very good. So what that means is it's kind of a career person, you know. A career is really important to you. Having status in career is really important to you, right?
Yeah, it is.
And you have success with it too, you know. But most of your life, then you've had Gemini, you've had Mars and Gemini jobs, which could be, you know, Mars could be engineering, it could be, you know, Gemini could be all the things we mentioned. What has dominated your life until even though you want to move into Ayurveda?
Yeah.
What would you say?
Yeah, so I actually studied engineering in undergrad and grad school both, and then now I work in what's called software product management for a lot of marketing software.
Okay, and now look how beautifully that works here. Okay, we said Gemini can be computers and software, but Mars is here. Mars is engineering. She's combining engineering and software here. Okay, and she's been making money from that, right? So I mean, it doesn't make you happy, but you know, but that's what you've been doing, right? Very interesting. Okay. See how well that works? Does it work? Am I?
Yeah, and I also work on marketing software, so that's another Gemini thing, I think.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, let's look at Venus chart. I'm going to go reverse alphabetical order so I don't. And we did Amanda already too, but Amanda always benefits from being A in the alphabet.
Which is interesting because growing up, my last name starts with a T, so I was always at the end of you know, having terms. So I'm enjoying having Amanda as my first name.
Yeah, your first name. So all of you know from your next class you have to change your name to A to move to the head of the class. Okay, so let's look at Vina. And Rashi 10th house is Taurus, which, you know, believe it or not, is very jewelry actually, because, you know, it's material. Whenever I tell people about Taurus, you know, to me it's always like physical beauty. So it's like interior design, it's jewelry, it's sculpting, it's making things that are very solid, you know, whereas Libra can be more painting or music or poetry and stuff like that.
I'm actually a musician also, Barry, so it's, you know, it's both.
You do painting also.
No, I do music also.
You do music also. That's right. I did know that. Okay. Okay, but we'll see if that comes up in the Navamsha chart, or we do have Venus in the first house in the Navamsha chart. We said for talents in Sag, and so remember, so the trines in the Navamsha chart bring out. So you were born with artistic talent, and you brought it in from past lives, right? I mean, probably you were good at it as a little girl, right? Yes.
Well, that was
music?
a long time ago.
Okay, I know. You're. That's well, you're not that old.
When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a singer or a general. Hence Mars, I guess, in the 5th house there.
Yeah. Okay. in Aries.
Yeah.
Okay. So and Leo is a kind of a Kshatriya sign anyway. But so we'll have to think about K2 here for a minute. But so then when we look at the 10th house in the Navamsha chart, we've got Virgo and we've got Rahu in it, and we've got Mercury aspecting it, and we've got K2 aspecting it. So, you know, one of the things, I said Rahu in Virgo is almost exalted. Rahu tends to create a lot of creativity also. Are you one of those jewelers that tries to make things that kind of have a healing energy to it? Like, you know, sometimes there's the healing quality of stones when people buy, you know, create.
No, I make glass, so there's no healing. It's happy glass, though. I call it actually happy glass because it changes colors and it makes people happy.
Okay,
basically.
okay. I was just curious if you had a
Nothing to do with healing. No.
Okay, no healing in your chart. Okay. The creativity is there. Now, normally I wouldn't pick Rahu, but the jewelry for sure, because that's what you have to start, you know, at the Lord of the 10th house in the Rashi chart, and then that's you know, kind of guiding you. But okay. Anything else you want to add that I'm missing?
Well, with Rahu there, I do fairs, you know, so it's kind of like being a carnival worker. So you're going from fair to fair. So that
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay, that's nice. That's interesting. You're a carnival worker. Okay.
Yeah, I always say we're carnies, but it's, you know, Renaissance fairs and different types of fairs.
Okay, great. Okay, let's look at one more. I still have lots of material to get to, and some of this is now going to bleed over into next week because there's so much material to do. But the learner. Okay, look at Joy's chart. Got Aries owning the 10th house. And the 10th house from the moon is Libra. Okay. Because you're Cancer rising, we probably should be using your moon chart more. And that's one of the things I teach in my foundations class, but particularly Cancer rising, for women and for Cancer rising, you particularly always have to use the moon chart, and we've got Libra owning the 10th from the moon. Okay, so let's make note of that. And Libra is kind of artistic, but you still have Mars in here either way. Navamsha talents, interesting. K2 Saturn. K2 could be a past life talent in astrology, which, you know, you were drawn to.
Well, of course, there's always diamonds, huh?
What?
There's always diamonds.
I know. So you think, where do you see the diamonds in your chart from your Western perspective?
Actually, I no. Yeah, maybe Taurus. Maybe Taurus.
So
Yeah.
Taurus does own the 10th house in the Navamsha chart, and Venus, the Lord, is in Sag. But Taurus does own the we've got Pluto in there. Again, Taurus is very material beauty, material, so jewelry is definitely part of Taurus, for sure.
What about the fifth house? Things from under, Scorpio brings out things from under the ground. Saturn turns them into money.
Okay, that's interesting. To me, Capricorn to me is the sign for like, because I also know this from financial astrology, is the sign more for mining. So diamonds are mined, gold is mined. So all the mining shares and miners are always connected to Capricorn, the mountain, and breaking into the mountain and mining it. So you've got your ascendant card there. You also have your A9 and your A10 there. That's interesting? So A9 is bringing, A10 is actual career, and A9 is actually
And
dormant.
my father taught me my profession, of course. Yeah. My father, my grandfather, my great grandfather.
Right.
So that that actually fits.
But the Taurus, the Taurus in the Navamsha chart, I think would have to be physical beauty, something connected to material beauty. So I think that does work well. Anybody else? I want to make sure we get in some of the other points. I just wanted you to get the main idea. Look at the sign and the planets in the 10th house. And now it may not turn into an actual profession. It may turn into, like in Sundari's chart, it worked really well. Sometimes it's something. Sometimes people have to get a job in a factory, but they'll do all their free time will be spent doing the 10th house in the Navamsha chart. I see that a lot. So I ask people, what do they do professionally? And they say, well, I have this boring job, at Walmart or something, or usually I don't get people like that, but I have this job that I don't like, but and I ask them, well, what do you like to do with your free time? And they say, oh, I'm just passionate about computer blogging and web design, and I want to become a web designer, and I've got Venus and Gemini or something like that, in the 10th house and the Navamsha. So sometimes people's passion will come up in the 10th house in Navamsha, but because I have 16 lessons in finding your life purpose. There's so many things that you look at before you say something, but the 10th house in Navamsha works pretty well. Okay, so let's move on. Kendras, this is an important point. The Kendras are always the building block of the Rashi chart. Our health, our home life, our marriage, our relationship, and our status in the world, are the Kendra houses. They're the foundation of the Rashi chart. In the Navamsha chart, they're pretty important also. The Kendras, you like planets in the Kendras in the Navamsha. Again, you don't want planets in the 3rd, 6th, 8th, and the 12th house. And, in any Varga chart, you're going to get some, and they're going to cause blocks. But we do like planets in Kendras, as in the Varga charts and in the Navamsha chart. And in the D9 highest section of good deeds we have brought toward the world into this life. So again, it seems to me it's your talents. It's what your past karma, and it's the merits of your past karma that you bring into this life. In the 1st house, planets in the 1st house, and 4th house, good deeds towards society or sattvic purpose. So there's kind of a more societal aspect to the D9, the 4th house. 7th house, good deeds toward our family, to uphold our spouse and family, again, relationship. 10th house, good deeds toward the world. So this is kind of a broader looking at the Kendras. I skipped some stuff. So those of you who go through the slideshow, you'll go crazy the way I've put together this presentation. I did want to introduce Baba Suchika today because it's an important concept. We'll have a whole class on it. When we're timing Baba Suchika, again, I translate into transposition. It's sign transposition, how many signs it moves from the Rashi chart to the Navamsha chart. And we don't want movements of 6, 8, or 12. I personally think 3s are just as problematic. When you study Varga charts, the third house is, you know, when I gave you rules for Vargas, the third house is, sometimes it's even death inflicting. The third house the third house from the Lagna chart will show you how you're going to die. So it's, see, the third house is the 8th from the 8th, so it has that kind of, you know, deep transformational quality to it. And people generally teach it as, oh, it's a growth house, you know. Yes, and it's about the arts and it's about writing. Well, yes, but in the Navamsha chart, it's a little bit deeper sometimes. Okay, so Bhava Suchika is house transposition sign to sign. So I got a question. I'm sorry I wasn't able to answer you. This has been like the craziest week I've had in years. It's not over yet until I get my taxes done. Kaysan had asked whether the slide was correct, and it is correct. Taurus in the Rashi moves to Libra, to Libra Navamsha, and it could be any Navamsha in any Varga chart. But let's just say Libra Navamsha. We said that was actually a problem. Libra Navamsha. And both are strong because, you know, Venus is in its own sign. And so you think if you don't look at the transposition, you think, oh, good placement, Venus is in Libra, but it moves 6 houses, so it may create blocks in expressing Venus. That could be blocks in expressing artistic talent. It may be a sick wife. It may be, you have to think of all the 6s. It may be problems with women at work. It could be a wife that you know is, you know, henpecks you or something. You know, we don't never like Venus in the 6th house. It creates a very difficult marriage. So the important thing is that when you don't use the Navamsha chart and you don't look at the transposition, you usually get things wrong, because the Navamsha chart qualifies the Rashi chart. If it doesn't work in the Navamsha chart through the transposition, it doesn't manifest. Okay. So let me save that. So how many, we shouldn't say how many signs, this is confusing. How many signs, and this is a little confusing. I sometimes
Sorry, Barry.
Okay, so
your last, but it never happens. It never happens when we have Taurus in Rashi. It never happens having, it never goes to Libra, because when we calculate to Taurus.
That is a mistake. That was a hypothetical situation. We do have Libra going to Taurus, so I should correct that. That's an 8 transposition. Okay, thank you. Thank you for, that is a mistake. Thank you for catching me. And sometimes, thank you. You're absolutely right. Isan is very smart. She catches all my mistakes. And that's good.
No, that's because I was looking for something else. I just wanted to ask you another question. That's why I told you that. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And I was, when you sent that email, I was so so crazed trying to finish my taxes that I just couldn't look at it. And I still was a little blind to seeing it right now, but you're absolutely right. Not a good example, but it was a theoretical example. I think when I made it up, it was supposed to be a theoretical example, but it's not a real example. Okay, but we did say this is an ashta mamsha. You can have Taurus, Libra rising, Taurus, Navamsha, and that's an ashta mamsha. That's the first, the second pada of Vishaka. Transpositions. Okay. Thank you. Keeping me on my toes here. Okay. So, but the point is that this transposition thing always saves me, and when I have to interpret stuff, because when I talk to people, the energy is always kind of happening. We learned that Vergota means integrated soul placement, so you're able to manifest your desires. So we like same sign, same Navamsha. Means the person is able to kind of manifest those values of the planet in there, the house involved, the sign involved. It's just very, it creates a lot of support for soul manifestation. A second transposition may mean spiritual and material gains, or it could be something connected to family, or it could be something around speech. But you can take all the house things, those of you who just completed Secrets of the Houses, you can remember all the things connected. Third is a growth house, courage to grow over time with this area, still challenging. Again, I just mentioned I sometimes have questions about 3 transpositions. To me, they're often difficult, but usually we grow through our challenges, so it's still very true. But they still bring challenges. Fourth transpositions, happiness, could be stuff connected to homes or domestic happiness, something like that. So blessings and creativity in the fifth transposition, those are always the best because the fifth house is the most powerful. Sixth house, blocks to achievement. Blocks, sometimes they can be health blocks, sometimes they can be problems at work, sometimes they can be problems with vices. So whenever you get a sixth transposition, you have to take everything that we learned in the house class and kind of apply it. Seventh is relationship, opposite values, business partners, anything like that. Eighth house is ashta mamsha, transformation due to unexpected events. So they're eight transpositions are the hardest because they're blocks. And sometimes they're there a long time in your life, and they're like a knot, and you just can't quite get through them. Ninth transposition, good luck and dharma will follow. Stuff with your father, stuff with your guru, spiritual journeys, pilgrimages. 10th transposition, action to create a good future for oneself. 11th transposition, material and spiritual profits and gains. 12th house, 12th transposition, again, the positive way of looking at the 12th house, sacrifice, service, expenditure, loss, frustration, movement toward moksha. So what happens is, I'll try to give you some good examples of this. And see, we're going to have a whole lesson on this. I just wanted to introduce it because I want you to, first of all, we did ashta mamsha, which is about the 8th transposition. But the 12th transposition and the 6th transposition, are very difficult. Whenever you see those transpositions, you get blocks, and they may happen in the dasha, they may happen, to the karaka, something like that. So it's interesting because my Navamsha chart, which is now Leo, puts the sun in the 12th house in a friendly sign of Cancer. And again, it reinforces that my life is always about service. I have Saturn in the 12th house. I'm a Karka, and for those of you who've been through my classes, I've just had 20 or 25 years of service. But again, Sun in the 12th here, the brightest way to look at it would be spiritual service work. And I think that's how it manifests in my chart, just because it's in Cancer and the moon aspects it here, and Jupiter aspects it. So we also have to look at the aspects here. I got an aspect from Mercury also, but there's 2 benefic aspects here, so all sattvic energy here. So that's in my chart. It's not. Now, if you were to interpret this as frustration in career, it might be correct also, because in the houses class now in my sun period, I went from being a professor of English or of comparative literature into writing a financial newsletter. And the sun period was about 5 or 6 years, and probably by the second year of the sun period, I was, I was building this new business, and it wasn't easy. And you can see with the sun in the 12th house in the Vamsha chart even that, it did eventually happen in the moon period, the moon's 7 away. And things really took off in my moon period. But in the sun period, it was building. It was like frustration, am I going to get a new subscriber? Am I going to make it? Am I going to make enough money? Should I keep doing it? And so there, you can also use this transposition technique to look at the dasha periods. And basically, the you know, if you remember the lesson on Vargas, you want to you know, when you're judging a period, you want to see what's going on in the Varga chart. If the transposition is bad, now the transposition is okay here. I was giving you a straight answer with Sun in the 12th house. Transposition from Sun to from Pisces to Cancer is a 5 transposition. And what did I go into? I went into investment, 5th house. There was some romance trying to bubble up. It didn't quite happen. So if we look at it from 2 perspectives, we see the transposition bringing up 5th house energies, and it was, you know, it was a time for me to be involved in trading and investment when my Sun period started, and the Rashi moved 5 houses. But in the Navamsha chart, the Sun is 12 houses away, so it didn't fructify. So you see how you can kind of put that together. Jyotish gets very complicated because if you try to just use one thing to interpret something, you've got to look at it in many different ways. You know, otherwise you don't get the right answer. You know. Okay. There's always more. I'm feeling like I'm at a good stopping place, but I'm willing to take some questions. Ian, we didn't look at your chart today, so we really need to look at your chart today. Just, I'm sorry if I ever miss somebody, don't ever take it personally. Sometimes it's just hard to get to everybody. Okay. Ian, you there? Can you get online, or? Sometimes people have to take breaks and things like that. Okay,
yeah,
there you are.
I'm here.
Okay, great.
I'm here.
Okay, so did you have any questions about your chart from what we studied today, or should we go over all the things that we learned today and recap them in your chart?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so so we learned the 4th house in the Navamsha chart is Mars. So the owner of the 4th house is Aries in the Navamsha chart. So Mars is the 64th Navamsha in your chart, and then from the Moon, the 64th Navamsha would be Mercury or Rahu, because Virgo is co-owned and Rahu's debilitated. Let's take Mercury. So Mercury is probably the ruler of the 64th Navamsha from the Moon. And I do remember that your Mars period was kind of rough. Were there a lot of health things also? Did you have like accidents and I know you had a lot of fights and things like that? What was it?
I've got lots of scars left over from that period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's working there. And then if we're timing the exact point of your 64th Navamsha from the ascendant, going to the 8th house, and your ascendant's at 1 degree, so 1 degree of Aries is going to be your 64th Navamsha. So Rahu's going to go over that in probably 2 years. You can watch and see if you have a long-term reaction to that. Again, it's the 8th house, so it brings up 8th house stuff. 8th house causes problems anyway, like illnesses and accidents and divorces and things like that. Depends on the dasha period. But the transit of Rahu and Saturn in 2027 will go over your 64th Navamsha point. So that's how you would look at it in terms of transit. Your 10th house, okay, let's look at your 10th house again is Gemini. You're a teacher. Your 10th house in the Navamsha chart is has Jupiter and Venus in it, again, Jupiter is a teacher also, so it's coming up in the Rashi chart. It's coming up in the Navamsha chart. And Venus, you know, could be teaching something artistic. In a sense, you do, you know, you probably teach poetry too in your classes, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And mixing up and changing and taking a lot of creative approaches to teaching as well, but certainly poetry and art within the study of religion as well.
Yeah, and that's okay. So that's all kind of Jupiter, Venus here in the 10th house, and it's in Libra. So, and Venus is in its own sign here. So there's probably a lot of joy in teaching here too with Jupiter and Venus here. And so I think that's good. What else did we learn today that we didn't recamp? Do you have any ashta mamsha placements?
I don't.
You do.
I don't believe so.
Okay, so anybody in the class can see them. Let's quickly look.
Barry, may I ask my question now? Do you remember?
Yes.
It was by Baba Suchaka. When it goes, it's nice, it's good, but when we by transposition, it goes to 6th or 8th or 12th house in Rashi. What does it mean?
Yeah, that we're going to have to spend 2 hours on the others part of it. So there's the second level of transposition when the Navamsha chart goes to the Rashi, and and then we have this whole nother level actually with the Aruda chart, but that's something that we've been doing in our advanced class. But Rasi Tulya, to me, the way with Rasi Tulya, you basically were getting a sneak preview. You take the Navamsha chart and you overlay it with the Rashi chart, and it gives you, and then you see how the planets interact. And so in Ian's chart, he's got this is pretty complex with Mars, Rahu, and Mercury here in his 3rd house, and then now we're transposing a debilitated Rahu into it. So it's kind of like accentuating all the energies here. So what I usually do with the Rasi Tulya, which is taking the Navamsha chart and moving it to the Rashi, is I want to see how the soul qualities are interacting and creating deeper energies for interpretation in the Rashi chart, and that's how it's often used. I don't, if I remember, and again, I don't use Rasi Tulya as much as I use Baba Suchaka. With Rasi Tulya, I'm not sure that transposition is as important. To me, what I was taught is that you're looking at the way the planets overlap, because we're looking at this, how the soul level planet interacts with the Rashi chart on a deeper level. So that's, I'm teaching a whole 2 hours on that again, because when I taught it the first time, I was just going with some superficial things that my mentor taught me, and I wanted to go deeper and do some deeper research on it. So I will, as you know, Jyotish is like an endless ocean. So I will look deeper and see if we can come up with that information. But that's how I use it. Okay.
I didn't get this correctly. Do you mean that Baba Suchaka is more powerful than Rashi Tulya?
No, Baba Suchaka. I think Baba Suchaka is essential for dasha timing. To see if something's going to manifest. I think Rasi Tulya is more powerful per personality, to see how certain qualities, hidden qualities in the Navamsha chart overlap in the Rashi chart. And so then they show you some things that you might not see. So like K2 here in Taurus gets conjunct Saturn here, creating more problems that you just wouldn't see with Saturn and Taurus in the 9th here. But K2 from Taurus going in here suddenly interacts with Saturn, and that can create some difficult energies. So that's how I use it, and I don't use it as much, and I may be wrong in not using it as much, but sometimes I'll teach, now that we're doing Navamsha 2.0, I want to, do extra research to see how we can go deeper with it. And that was a very long, complicated answer. So I guess the bottom line is, let's do some more research. Let me do some more research, and let's do a deeper presentation when we get to it at the end of the class, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. to be determined. He sounds always ahead of me a little bit, which is good. Keeps me on my toes. Okay. Other questions, other answers? So I've got to finish my taxes. No rest for the crazy Dochus teacher here. So next week, remember, mark your calendars, 12 o'clock Saturday, one day earlier, Saturday, 12 o'clock, so I can go to my dad's memorial service on Sunday. So mark your calendars, and if you can't come Saturday, you'll get the videotape. Chances are we'll still need to finish a few pieces from today's lesson, and then we'll start moving into relationship and Navamsha. And it probably deserves 3 weeks, but I think we'll do 2, and that will probably at least be a little bit richer. Okay, guys, have a great week. Any final thoughts? You guys, did you get all this stuff is good and clear and stuff like that?
Some of it is and some of it isn't. It's okay. It's okay. I'll go over the tape.
Yeah, you have, as I've mentioned from the beginning, it's like, first time you study it, it's like, oh my God, what is he talking about? And then, oh, I get it. You know, I have the same experience. I learn new things, and they're very complicated sometimes, and I just like,
yeah,
I gotta listen to it 3 times. You know,
right.
Barry, I thought it was clear. Then.
Okay, oh, yeah, good. I'm glad it was clear. I think you guys got the main points, and we just went over them. 10th house, fourth, you know, sign owning the 4th house, 10th house, talents in the first, so I think we got the main points. And we learned ashta mamsha, the transposition of the 8th house, and the other transpositions that are difficult. So that's the beginning and introduction to it. Okay, sweet guys. So we'll see you.
Barry, did you get the testimonial?
I did get you. Thank you, Joy, for sending me the testimonial. Thank you. I did get it. Thank you. I'm collecting testimonials to put on my website. If you like what I do, you can always send something in writing and give me permission to use it. That would be great, because people like reading those things, and they don't know who I am otherwise. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, Barry. Thank you.
See you next week.